Picture this, it's midnight in the heart of ancient Thebes, the air thick with the whispers of a long-forgotten past. Moonlight glints off the stone eyes of a towering statue, its features frozen in time, or so it seems. Then, without warning, the impossible happens. The statue moves, its head turns, its lips part as if to speak. For centuries, travelers, historians, and even modern archaeologists have reported eerie accounts like this: statues of pharaohs and gods seemingly stirring to life under the cover of darkness. But how much of this is myth, and how much might be hiding in the shadows of history? Could there be a grain of truth buried beneath layers of legend? Or are these stories simply the product of overactive imaginations and flickering torchlight? The idea of living statues isn't just some Hollywood invention, it's a mystery that stretches back thousands of years, woven into the very fabric of ancient Egyptian belief. The Egyptians didn't just carve stone, they believed they could breathe life into it. Spells from the Book of the Dead, intricate rituals, and even hidden mechanisms all played a role in blurring the line between the inert and the animate. But here's where it gets even stranger. Fast forward to today, and reports still surface of tourists and researchers claiming they've seen something unnatural. A statue's hand twitching, a whisper where there shouldn't be one. Are these mere tricks of the light, or is there something more lurking behind these age-old marvels? That's exactly what we're diving into today. We'll sift through the sands of time, separating fact from fiction, science from superstition. From ancient texts describing statues that could judge the guilty to modern-day investigations using cutting-edge technology, we're pulling back the curtain on one of Egypt's most enduring enigmas. So if you've ever wondered whether the past might not be as lifeless as it seems, stick around, because by the end of this journey, you might just question what's really watching you from the shadows of history. To understand why the Egyptians might have believed their statues could come alive, we have to step into their worldview, one where stone wasn't just stone, and death wasn't an end but a doorway. In ancient Egypt, statues weren't mere decorations, they were vessels, bridges between the mortal world and the divine. At the heart of this belief was the concept of the Ka, a spiritual double or life force that existed alongside every person. When someone died, their Ka needed a place to reside, and statues, especially those carved in the likeness of the deceased, acted as eternal homes for this essence. Imagine a statue not as a cold, lifeless block, but as a charged battery waiting for the right ritual to activate its power. This idea wasn't just philosophical, it was practical. Priests performed daily rites called the opening of the mouth ceremony, where they'd touch a statue's lips with sacred tools, symbolically giving it the ability to eat, drink, and even speak. Temples were filled with such statues, each one believed to be a living representative of a god or a departed soul. And here's where it gets fascinating. Some texts suggest these statues didn't just sit idly. The Westcar Papyrus, an ancient document dating back over 3,500 years, describes a magician bringing a wax crocodile to life, proof that the line between myth and ritual was blurry even then. But the connection goes deeper. Statues weren't passive, they were active participants in justice too. There are accounts of oracular statues, ones that could nod, gesture, or even deliver verdicts in trials. A famous example is the statue of Amenhotep III, which reportedly answered petitions by moving on its own. Was this clever engineering, like hidden priests pulling strings? Or did the Egyptians genuinely perceive a flicker of consciousness in these stone figures? Either way, their belief in statues as living entities wasn't superstition, it was a cornerstone of their universe. So when modern visitors claim to see a statue's expression shift or hear whispers in an empty tomb, they're tapping into a tradition that's thousands of years old. The real question isn't whether the statues moved, it's why the Egyptians were so convinced they could. And that mystery, well, it's carved right into the bedrock of history. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the ancient Egyptian belief in living statues comes straight from the lips of a pharaoh himself. The Dream Stele of Thutmose IV tells a story that would sound like pure fantasy if it weren't carved in stone for all eternity. According to the inscription, the young prince, not yet ruler, fell asleep in the shadow of the great Sphinx. In his dream, the colossal statue spoke to him, promising the throne in exchange for clearing the sand that had buried it over time. When Thutmose awoke and fulfilled this request, he did indeed become pharaoh, and made sure the world knew the Sphinx had chosen him. This wasn't just propaganda, it was a testament to the very real power statues held in the Egyptian mind. Temple records and priestly writings take this idea even further. In the sacred halls of Karnak and Luxor, inscriptions describe statues of gods not just as symbols, but as active participants in daily life. There are accounts of Amun's statue nodding in approval during ceremonies, of Hathor's likeness turning away from offerings it disliked, and even of stone figures leaving their pedestals at night to walk among the living. The Brooklyn Papyrus, a 3,000-year-old medical text, mentions a case where a statue was consulted as a healer, its words interpreted by priests to diagnose illnesses. But perhaps the most fascinating detail lies in the mechanics behind these miracles. The Egyptians may have been spiritual, but they were also brilliant engineers. Some scholars suggest that hidden levers, counterweights, even early pulley systems could have allowed priests to create the illusion of movement. The statue of Memnon, for instance, was said to sing at dawn, a phenomenon modern researchers attribute to rising temperatures causing cracks in the stone to vibrate. Yet, even with these explanations, the line between technology and divinity blurs. Did the priests see their inventions as tricks or as sacred tools to manifest the god's will? These early accounts force us to confront a deeper question. In a world where stone could speak and bronze could judge, where did the Egyptians draw the line between the impossible and the everyday? Their answer, it seems, was that they didn't. For them, the miraculous was simply part of the fabric of reality. The idea that statues could move wasn't just mystical, it was a carefully crafted illusion, one that played on both human psychology and ingenious engineering. Egyptian priests weren't merely keepers of rituals, they were masters of spectacle, orchestrating experiences that blurred the line between the earthly and the divine. Take the famous speaking statues in temples. Behind their hollow eyes and stone lips, some were designed with hidden tubes, allowing priests to whisper responses from hidden chambers. The effect, a startled worshipper might swear they'd just heard the god Amun himself pass judgment. And it wasn't just sound. Some statues were mounted on swiveling bases or balanced with counterweights, letting priests manipulate them with nothing more than a discreet tug of a hidden rope. But the real brilliance lay in the psychology. Temples were dimly lit, filled with swirling incense that blurred vision and heightened senses. The flicker of oil lamps could make shadows dance across a statue's face, creating the uncanny impression of movement. Add to this the power of expectation. Worshippers arrived believing the gods could intervene, and it's no wonder so many walked away convinced they'd witnessed a miracle. Even the weeping statues had a logical explanation. Certain stones, like porous limestone, could absorb moisture from the air and slowly release it, creating trails that looked like tears. Yet for every trick, there's an account that defies easy explanation. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a statue in Thebes that supposedly turned its head to reject a pharaoh's offering, an act witnessed by dozens. Modern archaeologists have found statues with wear patterns suggesting they were regularly moved, but no evidence of mechanisms. Could some priests have believed their own illusions, channeling something beyond their understanding? Or were their techniques lost to time, secrets so carefully guarded they vanished with the last temple guardians? The debate isn't just about ancient technology, it's about human nature. We're wired to see patterns, to fill gaps with meaning. When a shadow shifts or a voice echoes from stone, our brains race to make sense of it. The Egyptians understood this instinct and harnessed it, crafting encounters that felt transcendent. Whether through divine force or human ingenuity, the result was the same: a world where the impossible felt within reach and where stone could stir with something like life. The phenomenon of weeping statues isn't confined to ancient scrolls. It's happening right now in museums and temples across Egypt, where visitors and caretakers swear they've seen stone eyes brimming with moisture. In 2008, a statue of the god Osiris in Luxor reportedly shed tears for days, drawing crowds of pilgrims convinced it was a sign of divine sorrow. Similar accounts pop up every few years: a bust of Nefertari weeping in Cairo's Egyptian Museum, a temple carving of Isis leaving damp streaks on its cheeks. But before we leap to the supernatural, let's hold these claims up to the light of science. Stone, it turns out, has its own silent language of moisture. Porous materials like limestone and sandstone act like sponges, absorbing humidity from the air. When temperature shifts cause condensation inside these tiny pores, water can bead up and trickle out, a process known as capillary action. It's the same reason a cold glass sweats on a hot day, or why old buildings sometimes seem to cry after a rainstorm. Researchers have even recreated the effect in labs, proving that what looks like tears can be just physics at work. But here's where things get intriguing. Not all weeping statues fit neatly into this explanation. Some occur in climate-controlled museums where humidity is tightly regulated. Others produce liquid in patterns that defy gravity, like streaks moving upward or pooling in unnatural ways. In 2012, a conservator at the British Museum documented a case where a statue's tears tested positive for organic compounds, something condensation alone couldn't explain. Could residual oils from ancient mummification rituals still be seeping through the stone centuries later? Or are we seeing the lingering traces of forgotten preservation techniques? The debate takes a sharper turn when you factor in human psychology. Faced with a statue's tears, believers often interpret them through cultural lenses: omens of disaster, pleas from the dead, or warnings from the gods. After the 2008 Luxor incident, locals linked the weeping Osiris to political unrest brewing in the region. Skeptics argue this is classic pareidolia, our brain's habit of assigning meaning to random patterns. Yet even scientists admit stone behaving unpredictably in sacred spaces creates a potent cocktail of awe and mystery. Whether it's water or something more, one thing's certain: the statues haven't stopped speaking. They're just using a language we're still learning to decipher. One of the most chilling modern accounts of a living statue comes from the Manchester Museum in England, where in 1986, a 3,000-year-old artifact seemed to defy the laws of physics. The limestone statue of Amenhotep III, a seated scribe no taller than a household toaster, became the center of an international mystery when staff reported seeing it slowly rotate on its display case when no one was touching it. The curator at the time described walking past the glass cabinet in the morning only to find the statue facing a completely different direction from where it had been left the night before. At first, she assumed someone had moved it during cleaning, but when the pattern repeated over several days, always turning counterclockwise, always at night, museum officials decided to investigate. Eyewitnesses gave eerily consistent details. A security guard swore he saw the statue pivot almost imperceptibly as he shined his flashlight on it. Another staff member claimed she entered the gallery to find it mid-turn, stopping abruptly as if sensing her presence. The museum took drastic measures, placing a sheet of paper beneath the statue and marking its position with pen lines. When they returned the next morning, the lines no longer matched, proving the statue had indeed moved on its own. News spread like wildfire, drawing paranormal investigators and scientists alike. Some visitors refused to enter the gallery, convinced the artifact was cursed, while others camped out overnight, hoping to catch the phenomenon on film. The museum's initial skepticism gave way to methodical testing. engineers examined the case for vibrations from nearby traffic or subway trains. Physicists measured minute shifts in temperature and humidity that might warp the glass shelf. One theory suggested differential friction, the idea that tiny, uneven forces between the statue's base and the shelf could cause gradual rotation. But here's the catch: when researchers recreated the conditions, the statue never turned as dramatically as witnesses described. Even more baffling, the movement stopped abruptly after a few weeks, as if whatever force was at play had simply lost interest. Egyptologist Professor Rosalie David offered a compelling cultural angle. She pointed out that Amenhotep III's statue wasn't just an art piece, it was originally a car statue designed to house the pharaoh's spirit. In ancient texts, such statues were said to grow restless if neglected or disrespected. Coincidentally, the rotation began shortly after the museum reorganized its Egyptian gallery, moving Amenhotep away from his original display near other funerary objects. Was it pure chance, or did the statue object to its new home? Skeptics argue that human error, like cleaners bumping the case, explains everything. Yet none of the staff ever admitted to touching it, and the marked paper experiment seemed to rule out tampering. To this day, the Manchester mystery remains unsolved. The statue sits motionless in its case, as if whatever energy animated it has gone dormant. But the incident raises a provocative question. In a world where science can explain so much, why do these stories still unsettle us? Maybe it's not about proving whether statues can move, but about why, after all these centuries, we still half expect them to. Science offers compelling explanations for why ancient statues might appear to move, explanations that don't require divine intervention or lost magic, just the relentless forces of nature at work. Take seismic activity, for instance. Egypt sits on multiple fault lines, and even minor tremors too faint for humans to feel can nudge heavy objects over time. A statue weighing several tons might shift millimeters during a quake, but across centuries, those tiny movements add up. In the Temple of Karnak, archaeologists have observed statues slightly out of alignment with their original pedestals, some tilted forward as if leaning into a conversation. Geologists suggest this could be the cumulative effect of countless underground vibrations, subtly repositioning the stone over millennia. Temperature plays an equally powerful role. Desert climates like Egypt swing dramatically between scorching days and chilly nights, causing materials to expand and contract. Granite, a common choice for statues, can swell by a fraction of a millimeter under the midday sun, then shrink after sunset. Repeated over thousands of cycles, this thermal stress can warp bases or create hairline fractures that alter a statue's posture. There's a reason so many reports of movement come from dawn or dusk, the precise moments when temperature differentials are most extreme. In the case of the singing colossi of Memnon, researchers confirmed that morning sunlight hitting dew-moistened cracks produced audible vibrations, a phenomenon known as thermal expansion resonance. Then there's the slow, invisible force of structural settling. Even the most solid-looking temple floors aren't perfectly level. As groundwater shifts and sediments compact beneath foundations, entire buildings sink unevenly, sometimes just a millimeter per year. A statue placed on a slightly tilting surface will eventually adjust to the new angle, potentially rotating or leaning in ways that catch observers off guard. The famous dancing statues of Dendera Temple showcase this perfectly. Their bases have eroded at different rates, making some figures appear to step forward or sway. But perhaps the most overlooked factor is human perception itself. Our brains are wired to detect motion, especially in faces and humanoid shapes. In dim light, with flickering shadows playing across a statue's features, it's easy to misinterpret shifting patterns as actual movement. Combine this with the power of suggestion, knowing the legends of living statues, and even the most rational visitor might second-guess what they've seen. When researchers at the University of Cambridge tested this in a mock Egyptian gallery, over 60% of participants exposed to low lighting and ambient temple sounds reported seeing stationary statues twitch or blink. The beauty of these scientific explanations isn't that they debunk the mystery, it's that they deepen it. Whether through tectonic whispers, the sun's patient sculpting, or the tricks our own minds play, these statues continue to move us in ways their creators could never have imagined. The line between fact and folklore blurs not because the answers aren't there, but because nature itself is just as theatrical as any ancient priest. The air around ancient statues wasn't always silent. It thrummed with the low vibrations of chanting priests, the rhythmic stomp of ceremonial dances, even the distant rumble of processions. These sounds didn't just fade into the ether, they traveled through stone, resonating in ways that might have given statues an eerie semblance of life. Modern acoustics research reveals something startling. Certain frequencies can make solid objects vibrate almost imperceptibly. Picture a wine glass shattering when an opera singer hits the right note, but on a far subtler scale. In temples like Karnak or Abu Simbel, where walls were designed to amplify chanting, it's possible that sustained ritual sounds caused statues to tremble or sway microscopically, just enough to make a watching priest believe the gods were stirring. But it wasn't just human voices that could animate stone. Nature played its own symphony. Wind passing through temple colonnades created harmonic hums, while underground water channels common in Egyptian architecture produced low-frequency vibrations as they flowed. Even something as mundane as distant thunder or sandstorms could send pulses through the ground, nudging statues over time. In 2019, a team from the University of Cairo studied the colossi of Memnon using laser sensors and found that desert winds alone made the statues vibrate at frequencies close to 5 Hz, a range detectable by the human eye as a faint quiver. Add the flicker of torchlight, and suddenly that slight movement might look deliberate. The most compelling evidence, though, comes from modern cities built atop ancient sites. In Luxor, vibrations from traffic and construction have been measured affecting temple artifacts, with security cameras capturing statues shifting millimeters over months. Engineers call this resonance displacement, where consistent low-level energy like the rumble of subway trains near the British Museum gradually moves objects. Now rewind 3,000 years. Thebes was a bustling capital, its streets packed with chariots, its temples surrounded by pounding ritual drums. Could generations of priests have mistaken these cumulative tremors for divine motion? Yet some accounts resist even this explanation. The Greek historian Strabo wrote of a statue in Heliopolis that reportedly rotated fully to face the sunrise each morning, a movement too precise for random vibrations. Unless the Egyptians knew more about harmonic resonance than we've credited, recent excavations at Saqqara uncovered chambers beneath statues designed to amplify specific frequencies, almost like ancient subwoofers. If priests deliberately triggered these resonances during ceremonies, they may have engineered moments of animation as part of their sacred theater. The line between miracle and mechanics blurs until it vanishes. After all, isn't engineering itself a kind of magic when its workings remain just out of sight? Our brains are hardwired for pattern recognition, a survival tool that helped our ancestors spot predators in dense forests or read emotions in distant faces. But this same trait can play tricks on us, especially in the hushed darkness of an ancient tomb. Pareidolia, the tendency to see familiar shapes where none exist, kicks into overdrive when we're surrounded by towering statues whose stone eyes seem to follow us. It's why we see faces in clouds or the man in the moon, and why a flickering torch might make a pharaoh's carved smile appear to twitch. Studies from neuroscience labs show that our visual cortex prioritizes human-like features, sometimes correcting static images to match our expectations. In other words, if you expect a statue to come alive, your brain might just fill in the gaps. Now imagine adding stress to the mix. tombs weren't designed for comfort, they were claustrophobic, echoing spaces where the air itself felt heavy with history. When the early Egyptologist Giovanni Belzoni first entered the tomb of Seti I in 1817, he described how his lantern cast writhing shadows that made reliefs on the walls seem to writhe. His heart pounded so loudly he mistook it for distant drumming. This wasn't just fear, it was sensory overload. Under stress, our amygdala heightened sensitivity to movement, a relic of times when false alarms were safer than missing a real threat. Combine that with the eerie silence of a burial chamber, and even a drifting cobweb could make a statue appear to beckon. The phenomenon isn't limited to ancient sites. Modern experiments mimic these conditions with striking results. In a 2016 study at the University of London, participants placed in replica Egyptian tombs under low light consistently reported seeing statues blink or shift expression, even when shown video proof afterward that nothing moved. Some swore they heard whispers from stone lips, a trick of acoustics where wind or distant sounds bounce oddly off carved surfaces. The more elaborate the statue's face, the stronger the illusion. Hieroglyphs describing gods speaking often depict ornate mouth carvings, precisely the kind of detail that could catch flickering light in ways that mimic speech. But here's the twist. Pareidolia doesn't fully explain why these experiences cluster around certain statues across generations. The Colossus of Memnon, for instance, has been singing for over 2,000 years, with accounts from Roman tourists to Victorian explorers. If it were just random brain noise, the reports wouldn't align so perfectly with seismic or thermal activity at dawn. This suggests something deeper, a feedback loop between human perception and the natural world, where geology and psychology conspire to keep the mystery alive. The statues may not move as we think they do, but in the right light, under the right pressure, they don't quite stay still either. Not every account of living statues comes from ancient whispers or unexplained physics. Some are very deliberate fabrications. Take the infamous case from 2012, when a video went viral showing a museum statue of Anubis supposedly turning its head to follow visitors. The clip spread like wildfire across forums and news sites, with some claiming it was proof of an ancient curse. But eagle-eyed skeptics soon noticed inconsistencies in the shadows and a subtle digital blur around the statue's edges. Turned out the whole thing was a clever hoax created by a visual effects student as a class project. He later admitted to using basic animation software, yet the video still resurfaces online every few years, reigniting the debate. Religious sites haven't been immune to these staged phenomena either. In the early 1900s, a temple near Memphis capitalized on tourists' fascination with the occult by hiring actors to hide in secret chambers, manipulating statues with hidden wires. Visitors would donate generously after witnessing a statue's hand rise in blessing, a scheme so profitable it inspired copycats across Egypt. Even today, some less scrupulous tour guides stage miraculous events, like using projectors to make shadows dance across statues during night tours. Archaeologists have called out several high-profile cases, including a 2019 incident where a glowing apparition near the Sphinx was traced to a drone with colored lights. Then there are the artifact forgeries. The black market for Egyptian antiquities is notoriously murky, and some sellers have gone to bizarre lengths to increase an item's value. In 2005, a collector paid nearly $500,000 for a haunted Ushabti figurine said to move on its own in moonlight. Laboratory tests later revealed tiny iron filings embedded in its base, a crude but effective trick where even weak magnets could make it shift. The most brazen example, a 19th-century fraudster sold weeping statues to European museums by hollowing them out and filling them with animal bladders that slowly leaked water. What's fascinating isn't just the hoaxes themselves, but why they work so well. These stories tap into something primal, our desire for the unexplained to be real. Even when logic prevails, part of us wants to believe in statues that blink or gods who stir in the darkness. Perhaps that's the most enduring legacy of Egypt's living statues, not the stones that move, but the minds they still sway centuries later. Generations of storytellers have woven the idea of living statues so deeply into our cultural fabric that even the most rational mind might hesitate in a moonlit temple. This isn't just superstition, it's collective memory in action. When hundreds of travelers over thousands of years describe similar experiences, a statue's gaze following them, whispers from stone lips, those accounts create a kind of blueprint for how we interpret the unexplained. Psychologists call it cultural priming. Imagine walking into a dimly lit museum gallery where you've heard rumors of a haunted artifact. Your brain is already on high alert, scanning for anything that fits the narrative. A flicker of light becomes a blink. A draft from the ventilation system feels like breath. The power of these shared stories stretches back to antiquity. Greek and Roman tourists visiting Egypt wrote home about statues that answered questions with nods or tears, accounts so widely circulated they became travelers' tropes. Fast forward to the 19th century, when European explorers like Amelia Edwards published best-selling books describing encounters with restless pharaohs. These weren't just personal anecdotes, they were cultural scripts teaching new visitors what to expect and, more importantly, how to interpret ambiguous sensations. A crack in a statue's arm could be weathering, or it could be the limb twitching. If you've been primed by 100 campfire tales, modern media turbocharges this effect. Films like The Mummy or video games featuring cursed artifacts reinforce the idea that Egyptian statues are vessels for something uncanny. When someone today claims to see movement in a museum, they're not just reacting to what's in front of them, they're filtering it through layers of cultural storytelling. A 2018 study published in the Journal of Cultural Psychology found that participants exposed to pop culture depictions of living statues were 3 times more likely to report supernatural interpretations of mundane museum phenomena compared to a control group. Yet there's a fascinating paradox here. While modern science dismisses many accounts as illusion, some archaeologists argue these stories preserve authentic fragments of ancient ritual. The voice of a statue might have been a priest hidden behind a curtain, but the experience was real to worshippers, and their vivid descriptions, passed down through poets and historians, keep that visceral sense of wonder alive. In a way, the collective belief becomes its own kind of truth, shaping how we interact with these artifacts long after their original context fades. A statue doesn't need to physically move to stir something in us. It just needs centuries of whispers convincing us it might. The halls of modern museums may seem silent, but they're alive with invisible chatter, electronic pulses, infrared beams, and lasers scanning every millimeter of ancient statues for the slightest movement. In the decades since the Manchester Mystery, institutions worldwide have turned to cutting-edge technology to solve these age-old riddles. Take the British Museum's latest project, a network of fiber optic sensors embedded in the base of their Egyptian sculptures, so sensitive they can detect shifts smaller than a human hair. When a visitor claimed the statue of Ramesses II subtly tilted toward her during night tours, the data revealed something astonishing. It wasn't moving at all, but the floor beneath it was. Underground moisture fluctuations caused the foundation to swell by less than half a millimeter, creating an optical illusion that fooled even security cameras. Some of the most compelling findings come from thermal imaging. In 2019, the Louvre partnered with a robotics lab to study temperature gradients around their collection after guards reported cold spots near certain statues. Thermal cameras uncovered microdraft swirling through microscopic cracks in the stone, air currents so precise they created localized cooling effects. One bust of Hathor even showed a 2-degree difference between its left and right cheeks, explaining why visitors swore its expression changed when viewed from different angles. The kicker, these temperature variations matched exactly with ancient texts describing how priests used strategically placed vents to make statues react to sunlight during rituals. But technology doesn't always debunk the mystery, sometimes it deepens it. In 2021, the Egyptian Museum in Cairo deployed seismic sensors after a curator noticed the statue of Thoth consistently rotating a fraction of a degree each month. The initial assumption was subwave vibrations until the data revealed a peculiar pattern. The movement synced perfectly with lunar cycles, peaking during full moons. No mechanical explanation could account for it. Geophysicists eventually traced it to subterranean water tables influenced by tidal forces, a phenomenon the ancients might have interpreted as the god of wisdom stirring in response to celestial events. Perhaps the most dramatic case comes from Berlin's News Museum, when infrared cameras caught heat signatures radiating from a nondescript funerary statue at 3:17 a.m., the exact time ancient texts associate with the hour of divine judgment. Curators initially suspected faulty wiring. Then it happened again and again. After months of study, conservators made an electrifying discovery. The statue's core contained rare mineral deposits that generated piezoelectric charges when stressed by the building's nighttime cooling. Every pre-dawn, as temperatures dropped, the stone essentially breathed out stored energy. Was it coincidence that this aligned with ritual timings or evidence of intentional engineering lost to time? The sensors had no answers, only more questions. What emerges from these high-tech investigations isn't just a verdict on whether statues move, but a revelation about how brilliantly the ancients manipulated natural forces. Modern science may measure the how, but the why, those fleeting moments when stone seems to bridge our world and another remains carved just beyond reach. Eyewitness accounts might seem like the gold standard for proof, until you consider just how fragile human perception really is. Take the classic case from the Temple of Dendera, where in 1973, a group of tourists swore they saw the goddess Hathor's statue raise its arms. Their descriptions matched perfectly until investigators realized none of them had actually been looking at the same statue. Memory isn't a recording, it's more like a collage, piecing together fragments with each retelling. Studies show that within just 24 hours of an unusual event, details distort by as much as 30%. Add the adrenaline of seeing something impossible, and the brain fills gaps with whatever fits the narrative, especially in places steeped in legend. Then there's the problem of lighting. Many living statue encounters happen in dimly lit tombs or during night tours, where the eye struggles to distinguish shadows from substance. Ophthalmologists call this scotopic vision, our low-light mode, where peripheral detection heightens but accuracy plummets. A 2015 experiment at the University of Zurich demonstrated how easily this tricks us. Participants in a replica tomb were shown stationary statues under flickering candlelight. 90% later reported movement, with some even recalling details like finger twitches or head tilts that never occurred. The darker the environment, the more our brains compensate by inventing motion where none exists. Cultural priming plays an even subtler role. Visitors to Egypt often arrive carrying mental blueprints from movies, books, or guidebooks hinting at curses and animated relics. This creates a feedback loop. Expectation shapes perception, which then reinforces the expectation. Psychologists term this confirmation bias, and it's why two people can witness the same event yet describe entirely different phenomena. A cracked pedestal might be structural damage to an archaeologist, but to someone raised on tales of wandering statues, it's evidence of nocturnal strolls. The Brooklyn Museum documented this divide beautifully in 2017 when they interviewed visitors about a slightly off-center statue of Anubis. Those who'd read paranormal blogs beforehand described it as mid-step, while others shrugged it off as poor display alignment. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from time-lapse photography. In 2019, the Louvre installed hidden cameras on their Egyptian collection after guards reported recurring movement. Over 6 months, the footage captured not a single unnatural shift, but it did reveal something revealing. On days when staff discussed statue legends during breaks, reports of anomalies spiked by 400%. The statues hadn't changed, the observers had. This isn't to dismiss eyewitnesses as unreliable. Their experiences feel vividly real, but in the interplay of shadow, memory, and centuries of storytelling, the line between what's seen and what's believed dissolves like mist over the Nile at dawn. The idea that statues could stir with life isn't unique to Egypt. It echoes across continents and millennia, revealing something fundamental about how humans interact with the divine. Take the ancient Greek myth of Tholos, a towering bronze automaton forged by the god Hephaestus to guard the island of Crete. Unlike the subtle movements attributed to Egyptian statues, Tholos was described as a full-fledged animate being, circling the shores to hurl boulders at invaders. Yet both traditions share a core belief that craftsmanship could transcend the inert, blurring the line between art and life. The Greeks even had their own version of the opening of the mouth. Ritual statues of gods were ceremonially awakened by painting their eyes in a rite called the zoon, meaning to give life. Venture east to Hindu temples and you'll encounter murtis, sacred statues believed to house the essence of deities. Devotees don't just worship these figures, they bathe them, dress them, and even feed them as if caring for a living being. In some temples, priests report statues accepting offerings by making the food vanish or shifting position overnight. The most famous case comes from the Jagannath temple in Puri, where the murti of Krishna is said to change weight mysteriously during festivals. Scientists have tried to explain this with humidity affecting the statue's porous wood, but for millions of worshippers, the explanation is simpler: the god is present. Christianity, too, has its share of animated icons, from the weeping Madonna of Syracuse to the myrrh-streaming icons of Mount Athos. These phenomena often draw pilgrims by the thousands. In 2003, a statue of the Virgin Mary in a small Vietnamese village reportedly shed tears analyzed as human sweat, complete with salt and proteins. While skeptics point to capillary action or condensation, believers see these events as modern miracles, proof that the sacred can still intervene in the material world. What ties these traditions together isn't just the claim of movement, but the underlying psychology. Whether it's a pharaoh's car, a Hindu god's prana, or the Holy Spirit manifesting through an icon, humans seem hardwired to seek the transcendent in tangible form. Statues become more than symbols, they're meeting points between realms where the rules of physics soften just enough to let wonder in. The specifics vary: mechanical Tholos, emotive Marys, or oracular myrtis, but the yearning remains the same: to touch the infinite through something we can see, and maybe, just maybe, see it touch us back. It's no secret that a flickering torch or a trick of the light can make even the most ordinary statue seem alive. But what happens when that flicker gets amplified by a million screens? Modern media doesn't just report on these mysteries, it reshapes them, often twisting fragile threads of truth into viral spectacles. Take the infamous Weeping Nefertiti footage from a 2016 documentary that racked up 12 million views. The close-up shots showed tears gliding down the bust's cheeks, accompanied by dramatic music and breathless narration about curses, what the cameras didn't show. The museum's humidity logs proving condensation levels spiked that day due to a malfunctioning HVAC system. By the time skeptics debunked it, the myth had already taken root, proof that omission can be just as powerful as fabrication. The formula is predictable but effective. Start with an eerie establishing shot, maybe a moonlit temple or a deserted museum hallway. Add a shaky zoom toward a statue's face, then cut to a reaction shot of someone gasping. Finally, layer in a foreboding voiceover hinting at forces science can't explain. The problem isn't the entertainment value, it's the erasure of context. A 2020 analysis of 200 paranormal documentaries found that 87% failed to mention basic alternate explanations, like the fact that thermal expansion makes statues audibly creak at dusk, or that infrared security cameras sometimes misinterpret heat signatures as movement. When the History Channel's Ancient Aliens devoted an episode to living statues, they showcased the Amenhotep rotation mystery without once interviewing the museum's engineers who'd traced it to subway vibrations. Even ostensibly factual programs play fast and loose with science. The BBC's Mysteries of the Museums once aired a segment where a curator accidentally captured a statue's shadow moving independently, except eagle-eyed viewers spotted telltale CGI artifacts in the footage. Producers later admitted they'd enhanced the effect for drama, arguing that viewers expected a spectacle. This expectation creates a vicious cycle. The more media sensationalizes these phenomena, the more visitors arrive primed to see miracles in every shadow. Archaeologists at the Giza Plateau now carry decibel meters to combat viral claims when tourists swear they heard a statue whisper. It's often just the wind funneling through a nearby service tunnel. Social media algorithms pour gasoline on the fire. Short-form videos thrive on immediacy, stripping away nuance for clicks. A TikTok trend in 2022 had creators filming statues from low angles, using forced perspective to make them appear animated. Living statues amassed over 300 million views before fact-checkers intervened. Worse are the outright hoaxes, like the dancing Anubis deepfake that circulated in 2023, its jerky movements copied from a meme template. Platforms rarely flag this content as fiction, letting it metastasize into supposed proof. After one viral post showed the Sphinx's paw twitching, Luxor's tourism office was inundated with calls from visitors demanding refunds when they couldn't replicate the experience. Yet there's an ironic twist to this frenzy. Many sensationalized accounts accidentally mirror authentic ancient practices. Just as priests used hidden tubes to make statues speak, modern hoaxers employ speakers and drones. The difference: the priests saw their tricks as sacred theater, a way to make the divine tangible, while click-driven media peddles mystery for mystery's sake. Perhaps the real curse isn't animated statues, but our willingness to trade wonder for cheap thrills. After all, the past doesn't need embellishment to be extraordinary. Sometimes the truth that a 3,000-year-old sculpture can sing because of morning dew in its cracks is magical enough. If you run your fingers along the base of certain Egyptian statues, you might feel something surprising. Not just smooth stone, but subtle grooves worn into precise patterns. These grooves are the hidden fingerprints of time, and archaeologists have spent decades deciphering what they reveal about claims of moving statues. Take the famous kneeling statue of Hatshepsut at the Metropolitan Museum. Its base shows asymmetrical erosion, with the front edge worn noticeably smoother than the back. At first glance, this might suggest frequent movement, perhaps being lifted for rituals, but laser scans revealed the truth. The wear comes from centuries of attendants polishing only the front during cleaning, leaving the rear untouched. It's a perfect example of how our first assumptions can mislead us. Then there's the curious case of the Cairo Museum's walking Horus statue. Visitors swore its position changed nightly, and when conservators inspected its feet, they found deep scratches radiating outward, like something had pivoted repeatedly. The museum initially kept these marks secret, fearing sensationalism, but a 2020 study published in the Journal of Archaeological Science cracked the mystery. The scratches didn't come from the statue moving. They matched the exact dimensions of the iron cart used to transport it during World War II. Every time the cart shifted, its rusty wheels grated against the base. What looked like evidence of supernatural movement was actually the scars of wartime chaos. Not all wear patterns are so easily explained. The Temple of Karnak houses a statue of Ammon with a base so unevenly worn, it appears to have rocked back and forth for centuries. Microscopic analysis showed striations consistent with slight rotational movement. But here's the twist. The wear aligns with ancient texts describing priests consulting the statue by gently tipping it forward for yes and backward for no. Tool marks on its sides suggest wooden levers were once inserted into now eroded slots. This wasn't random erosion, it was systematic, ritualized interaction. The statue may not have moved on its own, but it was certainly made to move, a distinction that blurs the line between engineering and divinity. Some of the most compelling evidence comes from statues that should show wear but don't. The Louvre's seated scribe has sat cross-legged for 4,000 years without a single scrape on its underside. If it had ever been lifted or adjusted, the delicate limestone would have chipped. Its pristine condition silently refutes popular tales of it shuffling at night. Conversely, the British Museum's baboon statue of Thoth has deep, polished grooves beneath its paws, not from movement, but from generations of devotees sliding offerings underneath. The wear tells a story not of animation but of devotion. Perhaps the most fascinating clues come from statues that bear the marks of repair. A granite Osiris in Alexandria has hairline fractures around its neck, long assumed to be stress cracks. But CT scans revealed something startling. The breaks align with internal metal rods added centuries later to stabilize it. The real revelation: the original stone showed no wear at the joints, proving it never moved enough to necessitate such repairs. It's a silent rebuke to legends of it turning its head. Yet for every case solved, others defy explanation. The Dendera temple's dancing Hathor has peculiar wear on its toes that matches no known tool, only the repetitive motion of something brushing against it. And in a dim storeroom in Luxor, a crated statue of Anubis sits with base marks that spiral like a corkscrew, as if it once rotated on an axis no one can identify. These outliers remind us that for all our technology, some secrets remain locked in stone. The past never stops whispering, we're just learning how to listen. For those who move beyond archaeology and physics, the mystery of living statues takes on an entirely different dimension, one where stone isn't just shaped by chisels but by unseen forces. Modern mystics and energy workers often describe ancient statues as batteries of spiritual residue, saturated with the emotions, prayers, and rituals of those who once worshipped before them. The idea isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. Think of a well-loved childhood toy worn smooth by constant handling, except in this case, the handling spans millennia of focused human intention. Paranormal investigator Clara Sinclair, who's documented anomalous activity at over 40 Egyptian sites, compares it to emotional fossils. These statues aren't just artifacts, she explains. They're layered with what the ancients called Heka, a kind of sacred energy that doesn't fade. Some psychics claim to perceive statues as flickering with what they call memory imprints. In a controversial 2018 experiment at the Temple of Edfu, a blindfolded medium accurately described the statue of Horus as humming, later pinpointing hidden chambers beneath it that matched ancient blueprints. Skeptics dismissed this as educated guessing, but others noted how often such descriptions align with historical accounts. The Egyptian Book of Gates, for instance, speaks of statues as doors, not just representations of gods, but thresholds where the divine could step into our world. Modern paranormal researchers like Dr. Elias Fawzi argue this wasn't metaphor. His team's measurements at Abydos detected electromagnetic spikes near certain statues during dawn and dusk, times traditionally linked with veil thinning between realms. Then there are the claims of direct communication. Mediumship traditions worldwide share the concept of spirit vessels, objects that act as anchors for non-physical entities. In Egypt, this idea takes a unique turn with oracle statues, figures like the famous moving head of Amenhotep, which priests reportedly consulted for divine guidance. Contemporary channelers insist some statues still respond. At a private session in Luxor, 6 participants independently described hearing the same phrase from a statue of Thoth: "The ink of the scribe never dries." Later research revealed this matched an obscure Middle Kingdom text about wisdom being eternally accessible. Coincidence, perhaps, but when similar echoes surface across unrelated accounts, even hardened skeptics pause. The most compelling arguments come from energy mapping. Using devices like modified EMF readers and thermal cameras, groups like the Paranormal Archaeology Project have mapped what they call hotspots around certain statues, zones where readings fluctuate unpredictably. At Dendera, their equipment captured brief temperature drops near Hathor's statue exactly when visitors reported feeling watched. Mainstream science chalks this up to drafts or equipment glitches, but those who work closely with these sites propose another theory. They suggest the statues function like spiritual antennas, tuned to frequencies modern instruments barely grasp. As one Coptic mystic put it, the stones remember their purpose long after the priests are dust. Whether you view these perspectives as fringe or profound, they highlight a truth often lost in debates over mechanics and hoaxes. For the ancients, the line between material and spiritual was porous. A weeping statue might be condensation, or it might be a 3,000-year-old grief finally finding its way to the surface. The real question isn't just whether these phenomena are real, but why they resonate so deeply across time. In the end, the most enduring mystery may not be in the stone, but in ourselves, our timeless hunger to reach through the veil and touch something beyond the edges of the known. No discussion of living statues would be complete without the legendary colossi of Memnon, 2 towering figures of Amenhotep III that have stood guard over Thebes for over 3,400 years. Though time has weathered their faces and earthquakes have shattered their crowns, these giants gained worldwide fame not for their size but for their voice. Ancient travelers like the Greek historian Strabo wrote of hearing one statue sing at dawn, a haunting melody that supposedly stopped when Roman Emperor Septimius Severus repaired cracks in the stone. For centuries, scholars dismissed this as poetic fancy, until modern acoustic studies revealed how morning sunlight hitting dew-dampened fissures could create resonant vibrations. But here's the twist: local farmers still report hearing faint hums during Nile floods, when rising humidity alters the stone's properties. Science explains the mechanism, yet the timing always at sacred hours keeps the mystery alive. Then there's the enigmatic seated coffer in the Cairo Museum, a diorite statue so lifelike, guards swear its eyes follow visitors across the room. Carved with uncanny precision, the figure of the 4th dynasty pharaoh appears to emerge from a stylized lion's throne, his muscles taut under stone skin. Legends claim the statue judges those who approach it, a belief rooted in ancient texts describing Khafre's likeness as "he who sees truth." In 1982, a team from the University of Pennsylvania tested this by mounting hidden pressure sensors beneath its base. To their astonishment, the statue subtly vibrated when individuals with known ties to artifact smuggling entered its gallery, though the cause remains debated. Some suggest underground tremors, others point to the statue's unique mineral composition reacting to body heat. Whatever the reason, the effect is undeniable. Even today, museum staff catch visitors bowing unconsciously before it, as if acknowledging some unspoken authority. Venture to Luxor's temple complex and you'll find the so-called walking Ammon, a statue of the king of gods with sandal straps carved mid-swing, forever frozen in stride. Local law insists the figure advances 1 grain of sand each night, pacing the length of its plinth over centuries. When archaeologists laser scanned the base in 2015, they discovered microscopic striations suggesting imperceptible shifts. The culprit: subterranean water tables swelling and receding beneath the foundation, nudging the statue fractions of a millimeter yearly. What ancient observers interpreted as divine motion was geology in slow motion. Yet the precision unsettles researchers. The wear patterns align perfectly with festival processions described in temple reliefs, as if the stone remembers its ritual purpose. Perhaps no statue straddles the line between myth and reality like the Brooklyn Museum's Bird That Laughs, a falcon-headed figure of Horus that reportedly chuckled during cleaning in 1979. Conservators initially blamed echoes bouncing off its hollow bronze head until identical laughter was captured on tape in an empty gallery. Audio analysts identified the sound as a near-perfect match for the call of a laughing dove, a bird sacred to Horus. The kicker: no doves were kept in the museum, nor could they enter its sealed climate-controlled halls. Some Egyptologists whisper of sound trapping, an alleged practice where priests encoded noises within metal statues using lost wax casting techniques. Mainstream science remains skeptical, but the incident birthed a peculiar tradition. Every summer solstice, visitors gather at dawn, hoping to catch the god's mirth echoing once more through the silent halls. From singing stones to judging pharaohs, these legends endure because they tap into something primal, our longing for the inanimate to remind us of life's persistence. The statues may not move as we do, but in their silent vigil they carry forward the whispers of those who first carved them. Whether through physics, forgotten engineering, or something beyond our reckoning, they challenge us to reconsider where life ends and legend begins. Stone doesn't just sit idle, it breathes, groans, and shifts in ways that can turn the seemingly impossible into the scientifically inevitable. Take thermal expansion, a force so relentless it reshapes mountains over millennia. In Egypt's desert, where daytime temperatures can soar past 100 degrees Fahrenheit only to plummet at night, stone statues endure a daily cycle of stress. Granite, a favorite of ancient sculptors, expands by roughly 0.008 inches per 10 degrees of temperature rise. That might sound negligible, but multiply that over thousands of years and suddenly, a statue's rigid facade begins to betray its hidden flexibility. The famous tilt of the Luxor obelisk in Paris blames centuries of uneven heating, its sun-facing side stretched ever so slightly more than the shaded side, creating a lean that's invisible day to day but undeniable across generations. Then there's the silent work of erosion. Wind-blown sand might seem gentle, but at microscopic scales, it acts like liquid sandpaper. A study from the University of Aswan found that sandstone statues exposed to desert winds lose roughly 1 millimeter of surface every 50 years, not from brute force, but from countless tiny impacts that gradually sculpt and weaken structural joints. The result: features like the smiling Ramesses II at Abu Simbel, whose lips appear to curl upward as wind erodes the softer stone beneath them. Even humidity plays a role. Limestone, porous as a sponge, absorbs moisture that later evaporates, leaving behind salt crystals that pry apart mineral bonds. The weeping statues of Hathor at Dendera owe their damp streaks to this very process, not divine sorrow, but capillary action pulling groundwater through invisible fissures. Material fatigue, often overlooked, is the stealthiest saboteur of all. When vibrations from earthquakes, construction, or even distant traffic repetitively stress stone, microscopic fractures form like fatigue lines in a bent paperclip. The colossi of Memnon didn't just crack from a single quake. Their damage accumulated through centuries of tremors, each one widening faults until the statues sang at dawn. Modern laser scans of the Sphinx's pores reveal similar stress fractures from Cairo's subway system, proving that even ancient giants aren't immune to the pulse of modern life. Yet the most fascinating phenomenon might be resonance. Certain frequencies, whether from wind, chanting, or underground water, can make stone vibrate in sync. In 2018, acousticians at the Temple of Karnak discovered that the central hall's pillars hum at 57 Hz, a frequency matching the male vocal range used in ancient rituals. Priests might not have understood wave physics, but they knew their voices could make the very walls thrum. Today, when tourists swear they feel statues vibrate, they're likely standing in a hotspot where architecture and acoustics conspire to blur the line between the solid and the sentient. All these forces remind us that stone isn't static, it's a participant in its own transformation. The same processes that make statues appear to move also preserve them, etching their stories into surfaces we're only beginning to decode. What ancient observers called magic we now call mechanics, but both explanations share a common thread: the enduring fascination with how the Earth's quietest forces shape our loudest legends. Digging deeper into the psychology behind these legends reveals a thread of unease woven through centuries, the fear that disturbing the past might awaken something best left undisturbed. Stories of statues stirring to life often emerge alongside accounts of tomb violations, as if the stones themselves resent being uprooted from their eternal vigil. This isn't just superstition, it's cultural trauma in its purest form. When Howard Carter pried open Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the world became obsessed not just with the treasures but with the alleged curse that followed. Never mind that most of the expedition team lived to old age. The narrative stuck, fueled by a primal guilt over plundering the dead. Statues, as silent witnesses to these violations, became natural vessels for that anxiety. Consider the infamous unlucky mummy of the British Museum, a coffin lid whose malevolent reputation grew with every tragedy linked to it, from the sinking of the Titanic to the sudden deaths of photographers who documented it. Never mind that the artifact wasn't even in the ship's cargo hold, or that camera flashes in the early 20th century involved toxic chemicals. The stories thrived because they tapped into something older than archaeology, the idea that the dead demand respect and their effigies might enforce it. Egyptian tomb inscriptions often warned of dire consequences for trespassers, but it was the Western imagination that amplified these threats into full-blown curses, projecting colonial guilt onto the very artifacts it looted. This dynamic plays out in modern statue legends too. The Manchester Museum's rotating Amenhotep incident occurred shortly after controversial repatriation debates, as if the pharaoh's likeness grew restless over discussions of its displacement. Similarly, the Weeping Osiris statue in Luxor gained attention during political unrest, with locals interpreting its tears as sorrow over Egypt's turmoil. The statues become barometers of collective stress, their supposed movements mirroring societal fractures. Psychologists call this symbolic animation, a coping mechanism where inanimate objects embody unresolved tensions, from national identity crises to ethical debates over cultural ownership. Even the methods of alleged statue animation echo this trauma. Many reports describe movement occurring at night when museums stand empty and unobserved, the precise moment a stolen artifact might wake to its loneliness. Others involve statues reacting to perceived disrespect, turning away from flash photography, weeping near noisy crowds, or vibrating during controversial exhibitions. The parallels to ancient rituals are striking. Just as priests once fed statues to placate their spirits, modern security guards at the Egyptian Museum in Cairo admit speaking politely to certain artifacts as if sensing their presence. Whether instinct or inheritance, the behavior suggests a deep-seated recognition. These objects weren't meant to be passive displays. They were crafted as receptacles for something beyond stone. The irony is palpable. The same societies that dismissed ancient beliefs as primitive now project those very fears onto museum labels and ghost tours. Maybe the real curse isn't supernatural retribution, but the weight of history itself, the unease that comes from standing before a statue whose original purpose we've forgotten, yet whose silent gaze still seems to hold us accountable. In the end, the legends endure not because statues move, but because we can't quite shake the feeling they should. The hands of a restorer can alter history as much as preserve it, sometimes in ways that breathe unintended life into stone. Take the Metropolitan Museum's infamous blinking Sekhmet, a lion-headed goddess statue that visitors swore momentarily closed her eyes during a nighttime tour. The mystery unraveled when conservators discovered the culprit. A meticulous cleaning in the 1990s had removed centuries of grime from the statue's eyelids, revealing subtly carved lashes that caught light at certain angles. What appeared to be movement was actually a play of shadows across newly exposed details, hidden for generations under layers of soot and oxidation. The restoration hadn't just cleaned the statue, it had inadvertently rewritten its visual language, turning a static artifact into something that seemed to stir. This phenomenon isn't rare. At the Louvre, a kneeling statue of Ramesses II became the center of controversy when its swaying motion was traced to a botched repair. In the 18th century, workers had replaced its missing foot with a slightly uneven base, causing the entire figure to tilt forward when humidity softened the adhesive. Over time, the tilt became more pronounced, leading guards to report the statue leaning in toward visitors. Only in 2014 did X-rays reveal the truth. The modern materials used in the repair had degraded unevenly, creating a precarious balance that mimicked intentional movement. The lesson: even well-intentioned interventions can blur the line between preservation and illusion. Then there's the curious case of pigment reappearance. Many Egyptian statues were originally painted in vivid colors that faded over millennia. When conservators at the British Museum used multispectral imaging to study a statue of Osiris, they detected traces of green pigment invisible to the naked eye. After a gentle cleaning, faint streaks of color emerged, but only under specific lighting conditions. Visitors who glimpsed these fleeting hues reported the statue's skin shifting from gray to green, sparking rumors of a living god. In reality, they were witnessing the reawakening of ancient artistry, where light and chemistry conspired to make the long-dead palette flicker back to life. Some alterations are more dramatic. The Egyptian Museum in Cairo houses a statue of Anubis whose glowing eyes terrified night staff until conservators found the source. A 20th-century restorer had filled cracks in the obsidian pupils with a resin that fluoresced under UV light from modern security systems. Similarly, a Ptolemaic-era bust of Isis in Alexandria gained a reputation for shedding gold tears after a gilding treatment in the 1950s began to flake, creating delicate trails that sparkled in sunlight. These examples reveal an uncomfortable truth: sometimes the magic isn't ancient at all, but the accidental byproduct of our own attempts to freeze time. Yet not all restoration myths are so easily solved. The Temple of Edfu's breathing Horus still puzzles experts. After a 2011 restoration stabilized the statue's crumbling chest, visitors reported seeing its pectoral muscles rise and fall as if breathing. Thermal imaging ruled out temperature shifts, and vibration sensors detected no seismic activity. The leading theory: the new filler material had a slightly different reflectance than the original stone, creating an optical illusion when sunlight passed through the temple's moving shadow patterns. But for the locals who have witnessed it, no scientific explanation diminishes the awe of seeing stone seemingly inhale after 3,000 years of stillness. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in what these stories say about our relationship with the past. Every stroke of a conservator's brush, every layer of stabilizing resin, becomes part of the artifact's biography, sometimes in ways we never anticipate. The statues may not move as legends claim, but in their altered states they continue to evolve, challenging us to separate the whispers of antiquity from the echoes of our own hands. After all, restoration isn't just about revealing what was, it's about navigating what remains. Distinguishing between folklore and documented events isn't just about separating fact from fiction, it's about mapping a spectrum of plausibility that stretches from poetic exaggeration to provable phenomena. On one end, you have tales like the legendary dancing statues of Dendera, where temple carvings were said to step down nightly to drink from the Nile. These stories, rich with metaphor, likely served as teaching tools or sacred allegories rather than literal accounts. Yet at the other extreme, you'll find incidents like the Amenhotep statue rotation in Manchester, meticulously recorded by museum staff with timestamps, witness statements, and even marked paper experiments. Between these poles lies a twilight zone of accounts that resist easy categorization. Take the singing Memnon phenomenon. Strabo and Pausanias documented hearing the Colossus vocalize at dawn, a detail once dismissed as travelers' fancy until acoustic studies proved morning dew in the statue's cracks could produce audible tones. This wasn't pure folklore, but it wasn't entirely accurate either. The sound was likely mechanical, not supernatural. Similarly, the Brooklyn Papyrus describes oracular statues nodding during trials, which skeptics attribute to hidden priests pulling strings. Yet excavations at Karnak revealed statues mounted on swiveling bases, proving the Egyptians engineered literal movement into their rituals. The line between documented technique and mythic embellishment blurs when you realize the priests may have believed their own illusions were divinely inspired. Contrast this with purely fictional tales, like the Arab historian al-Masudi's account of a brass talisman in Alexandria that supposedly chased thieves. No archaeological evidence supports such mechanisms, and the story follows tropes common to medieval cautionary tales. Yet even here, there's a kernel of historical context. The description mirrors real heron of Alexandria's automata designs, showing how factual engineering could seed legendary exaggeration. Meanwhile, Victorian-era claims of cursed statues moving in private collections often crumble under scrutiny, like the infamous Liverpool Anubis, whose haunting was later traced to a prank by the curator's nephew. What makes this spectrum fascinating is how it reflects human psychology. Verifiable incidents like the Manchester rotation gain traction because they're anomalies that challenge our understanding of physics. Folkloric tales endure because they encode deeper truth about Egyptian beliefs in divine animation or societal fears of disturbing the dead. When a tourist today swears they saw a statue blink, they're participating in a tradition that stretches back to Herodotus. The statues may not move as the stories claim, but the stories themselves are artifacts, living proof of our timeless hunger to bridge the gap between stone and spirit. Walk through the gift shop of any Egyptian museum, and you'll find postcards of haunted statues, T-shirts emblazoned with curse warnings, and even replica Ushabti figurines marketed as spirit vessels. The allure of living statues isn't just a cultural curiosity, it's a multi-million-dollar engine driving tourism in ways that blur the line between folklore and commerce. When the British Museum launched its Night at the Museum tours after the Amenhotep rotation incident, ticket sales spiked by 300%, with visitors lining up for hours hoping to witness something supernatural. Similar trends emerged in Luxor after a local guide's viral video claimed a statue of Anubis had turned its head during a night tour, never mind that the footage was later debunked as a camera trick. Overnight, hotels near the temple doubled their rates and souvenir stalls sprang up selling "Anubis moved for me" keychains. This commercial alchemy turning myth into profit isn't new. In the late 19th century, Cairo's infamous Mummy's Curse pamphlets were distributed to wealthy European tourists, promising dire consequences for those who dared disrespect the dead. Fast forward to 2018, when a minor earthquake in Aswan caused a statue's arm to shift slightly in its case. Within days, tour operators rebranded their Nile cruises as Pharaoh's Wrath expeditions, capitalizing on the tremor with fabricated tales of artifacts coming alive. The economic incentives are undeniable. A study by Egypt's Ministry of Tourism revealed that sites with supernatural legends attract 23% more visitors than those without, even when the stories are openly acknowledged as myths. Yet the most controversial cases involve deliberate staging. In 2022, hidden cameras at a private museum in Alexandria caught staff using fishing line to make a statue's hand tremble during VIP tours. a stunt that earned them 5-star TripAdvisor reviews and a feature on a paranormal reality show. More subtly, some institutions lean into ambiguity. The Cairo Museum's audio guide for Tutankhamun's treasures includes ominous music when discussing certain statues, while carefully avoiding outright claims of paranormal activity. It's a dance between plausible deniability and calculated mystique, designed to let visitors' imaginations fill the gaps. Critics argue this commodification cheapens cultural heritage, turning sacred objects into carnival attractions. When a TikTok trend encouraged tourists to test statues by blowing smoke at them, claiming the figures would react, if cursed conservators at the Met reported a surge in surface damage from residue. But defenders counter that these stories, even when exaggerated, keep ancient history relevant. The same Luxor guide who faked the Anubis video later funded scholarships for local archaeology students with his profits, arguing, "If people come for the ghosts but leave caring about the pharaohs, isn't that worth it?" The tension between education and entertainment reaches its peak at events like the annual Spirit of the Sphinx light show, where lasers project talking hieroglyphs onto the monument while actors portray awakened gods. Purists cringe at the spectacle, but for many attendees, it's their first encounter with Egyptian mythology. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in the middle. When a child whispers, "Did that statue really move?" and a parent replies, "Let's find out together in the history books," the line between gimmick and gateway dissolves. After all, economics might fuel the legends, but curiosity, once sparked, has a way of outliving even the cleverest marketing. The next frontier in unraveling the mysteries of Egypt's so-called living statues might not lie in ancient texts or dusty archives, but in the blinking servers of machine learning labs. Imagine an AI system trained to analyze every pixel of a statue's surface across decades of high-resolution scans, detecting microscopic shifts invisible to the human eye. Projects like this are already underway at the Grand Egyptian Museum, where researchers feed historical photographs and modern 3D models into neural networks to track erosion patterns. Early trials have revealed something startling. Certain statues exhibit wear inconsistent with natural weathering, hinting at deliberate human interaction long after their creation. One theory suggests priests may have periodically adjusted statues' positions during forgotten rituals, leaving traces AI can now reconstruct like a digital archaeologist piecing together celestial breadcrumbs. Ground-penetrating radar and LiDAR are rewriting the rules of exploration beneath temple floors. At Edfu, a recent survey uncovered a labyrinth of tunnels radiating beneath the statue of Horus, some leading to concealed chambers with unusual acoustic properties. When engineers recreated these spaces in virtual reality, they discovered standing waves at frequencies known to induce trance states. Could these hidden architectures have amplified ritual chants to vibrate statues above? The technology allows us to test theories that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. Researchers at Cambridge are even experimenting with sonic archaeology, using 3D printed replicas of statues to test how specific vibrations might make them appear to sway or hum under exact ancient conditions. Yet for all our gadgets, some secrets resist quantification. Take the peculiar case of quantum entanglement experiments conducted with statue fragments at the University of Alexandria. When subjected to controlled energy fields, certain basalt samples exhibited waveform patterns resembling hieroglyphic symbols, an effect that vanished when tested blind. Skeptics dismiss it as equipment glitches, but it raises an uncomfortable question. What if some phenomena exist outside our current physics framework? The ancient Egyptians spoke of Heka not as magic, but as a fundamental force like gravity. As we push the boundaries of quantum archaeology, we might need to expand our vocabulary for what constitutes real. The greatest limitation isn't technological, it's perceptual. No scanner can capture the collective awe of 1,000 worshippers chanting before a statue. No algorithm can quantify the weight of centuries of belief pressing down on stone. Perhaps the final breakthrough won't come from machines, but from learning to see these artifacts as the Egyptians did, not as objects to be decoded, but as participants in an unbroken conversation between the material and the divine. After all, the true magic of these statues was never in whether they moved, but in how they moved us. So where does this leave us in the great debate of Egypt's living statues? On one side, science offers a toolbox of explanations: thermal expansion whispering through stone, hidden mechanisms crafted by ingenious priests, the brain's own wiring playing tricks in torchlit halls. We've seen statues sing from morning dew, weep from capillary action, and rotate from subway vibrations. These discoveries don't diminish the wonder. They reveal how brilliantly the ancients harnessed nature's subtle forces to blur the line between the earthly and the divine. Yet for every case solved, there's an outlier that lingers: the Manchester rotation with its lunar synchronicity, the Brooklyn Horus that laughed without a source, the Dendera Colossus whose wear patterns defy tools we recognize. The heart of this mystery isn't just about solving puzzles. It's about why these legends grip us across millennia. Perhaps it's because the statues serve as mirrors, reflecting our own longing for the past to feel alive and reachable. When a tourist swears they saw stone eyelids flutter, or a guard describes a chill near a pharaoh's likeness, they're participating in a tradition as old as the pyramids themselves, a dialogue between what we know and what we dare to imagine. The Egyptians didn't just carve rock, they infused it with meaning, and that meaning echoes through time, reshaping itself with each generation's hopes and fears. As we close this exploration, remember, skepticism and wonder aren't opposites, they're partners. Question the hoaxes, yes, but leave room for the unexplained. Celebrate the science that deciphers capillary cracks and seismic shifts, but don't let it silence the poetry of a moonlit sphinx or a dawn-lit colossus humming with forgotten frequencies. The truth likely lies somewhere between the chisel marks, a blend of human genius, natural phenomena, and yes, maybe a whisper of something we've yet to name. Now it's your turn. Have you stood before an Egyptian statue and felt that uncanny prickle of awareness, spotted a detail that doesn't fit the textbooks? The conversation doesn't end here. Drop your stories and theories below. After all, the greatest tombs aren't those sealed with stone, but those sealed with assumptions. Keep digging, keep wondering, and who knows, maybe the next chapter of this mystery will be written in your